Have you ever said yes when deep inside, everything screamed no? Have you ever smiled to keep the peace even though you were crumbling inside? Maybe you're tired and exhausted, but you don't even know why. There's a type of pain that doesn't leave visible marks. A quiet, persistent ache that's hard to name. This pain arises when you start betraying yourself piece by piece, every single day. You act the way you're expected to. You modulate your voice, pick your words carefully, and hide what you really feel. All to avoid inconveniencing others, to not disappoint, to be accepted. You adapt, and for a while it seems to work. People like you. You become reliable, pleasant, and predictable. But behind this perfect social mask, something begins to shift. A void starts to form. A discomfort grows quietly inside you, a feeling that something is being left behind, suffocated. This feeling? It's the beginning of a silent rebellion against yourself. Carl Jung called this mask persona. It's necessary, sure, we all need it to navigate the world, to interact with society. But here's the danger. When you stop wearing the mask and start to become the mask, you forget that behind the character, there is a real person with real desires. Desires that don't always fit, anger that isn't polite, thoughts that aren't pleasing. That's when things start to break. You feel it. You can't explain it, but it's there. It's as if you're living someone else's life, an actor in a play that never ends. This video isn't about rebelling against society or throwing everything out the window. It's about something deeper, recognizing when the need to be accepted is pushing you farther away from who you truly are. It's about taking a step back, looking inside, and realizing you've been living more to please others than to live authentically. And trust me, this kind of self-neglect comes at a cost. Anxiety, identity crises, resentment, and a silent sadness that lingers. So let's talk about it openly. Let's confront this pattern of living for others. We'll dive into what Jung discovered about the relationship between the ego, the persona, and the unconscious. We'll explore why the desire to please others isn't just a personality trait, it's a symptom of being disconnected from your essence. And most importantly, we'll discuss the path that can lead you back to yourself. This video is a mirror, and maybe even a punch to the stomach. But if you're here, it's because deep down, you already know you can't keep going like this. So, take a deep breath. Today's journey might shake everything you thought you knew about yourself. From a young age, you learned how to behave, to hide your true feelings, to control your impulses, and to smile even when you wanted to disappear. You learned that to be accepted, you needed to be convenient. You learned that your worth came from being what others expected, not from simply being yourself. And before you knew it, you had crafted a socially acceptable version of you, a persona. Jung described the persona as a kind of psychological construct. It's a character you create to navigate the world around you. The persona is important. It's necessary. It's the reason we can work, participate in groups, and live in society. The issue starts when we stop seeing the persona as a mask and begin to think that it's who we really are. You start to act calm, even when you're boiling inside. You become the person who's always available, always helpful, always balanced, because that's what others expect from you. But here's the truth. Every time you pretend to be okay when you're not, every time you ignore your anger to avoid conflict, every time you say, "I'm fine," when everything inside you is screaming otherwise, a small piece of you is silenced. These little denials build up over time, and cracks start to form. They accumulate. You begin to lose track of who you truly are. Your desires get confused, your decisions become automatic, and you start living based on what others expect of you, not what you truly believe or desire. This is when the persona stops being an adaptive tool and starts to feel like a prison. The cruelest part of all is that on the outside, everything seems to be working. You receive compliments, people trust you, you seem successful, functional, even happy, but inside, something is dying. The mask has become part of you, your skin, and you no longer know how to take it off without losing everything you've built. But is maintaining this image really worth the price of giving up yourself? How many times have you stayed silent to avoid confrontation? How many times have you regretted saying yes when you really wanted to say no? How many times have you smiled on the outside while screaming on the inside? The truth is, the persona should never command your life. When you identify too much with this role, you begin to live as a shadow of yourself. Over time, this disconnects you from your soul, the very center of your existence. It's right at this point that something inside you starts to rebel. This rebellion has a name: internal conflict. In the next part, we'll dive into this silent battle between the ego and the unconscious. We'll explore what happens when you start living in disagreement with your own truth. So, let's move forward. If this content is resonating with you, don't forget to click the subscribe button and join the community. Thank you for your support. There is a war happening inside you. The battlefield is invisible. On one side is the ego, the conscious part of your psyche that craves adaptation, recognition, stability, and belonging. The ego wants to keep its social image intact, to avoid rejection, to control everything to ensure you continue to be accepted. On the other side is the unconscious, the deep, wild, symbolic part of you that wants nothing but truth. While the ego tries to keep the persona functioning, the unconscious begins to react. And it doesn't send clear words, it sends subtle signals, quiet discomforts, disproportionate emotions, unexplainable physical sensations. You feel anxious for no reason, irritated by the smallest things, tired even after a full night's sleep, sad even when everything in your life seems right. These aren't just random feelings, they're the early signs of something much deeper. They are the muffled cries of your soul being ignored. Jung said that when the ego distances itself too much from the whole psyche, the unconscious compensates. It's like an internal scale trying to restore balance. The more the ego insists on maintaining appearances, the more the unconscious reacts. If you push the persona too hard, the unconscious responds with shadow. And here's the thing, the shadow doesn't disappear when you repress it. It seeps into your automatic behaviors, your relationships, your self-destructive choices, and that constant feeling of being disconnected from yourself. This psychic conflict generates chronic tension. You try to keep everything under control, but something always slips away. You do the right thing, but you feel empty. You act as expected, but deep down there's anger, contempt, and fatigue. And this bottled up anger, it's not directed at others. It's directed at yourself. Each time you betray yourself to fit in, you disappoint yourself. The pain doesn't show up all at once, it accumulates. Slowly, quietly, it eats away at your vitality. It corrodes your soul from the inside. The problem is that this conflict is invisible. To the outside world, you look fine. You smile, do your work, manage everything as if you've got it all together. But inside, you no longer know what you're feeling. You only know something is wrong, and you can no longer pretend that everything is okay. You can continue to ignore these signals. You can keep telling yourself it's just a phase. You can keep trying to adapt, but the price is high. An existence without authenticity, an existence without purpose, an existence without soul. But here's the good news. There's a way to understand why this pattern forms, why some people are more vulnerable to it than others, why some of us live for others, feel guilty for having our own needs, and erase ourselves without even realizing it. Jung identified a specific psychological type that is especially prone to this dynamic. In the next part, we'll explore this type and help you determine whether this sounds like you. And more importantly, why understanding this could be the key to finally breaking free. Break out of this cycle. Let's continue. Not everyone interacts with the world in the same way. Jung showed us that each person has a unique psychic structure, shaped by psychological functions and fundamental attitudes, that determines how they perceive reality and make decisions. Among these different psychological types, there's one in particular that carries a structural fragility when it comes to pleasing others. The extroverted feeling type. This type doesn't just desire connection, they need it. For them, being in harmony with the social environment feels almost like a matter of emotional survival. Their internal system is finely tuned to pick up on what others feel, think, and expect. They enter a room and immediately adjust their behavior to avoid friction, to please, to ensure acceptance. The extroverted feeling type lives for approval. Their internal moral compass gets lost because they're constantly trying to align with the values of others, even when those values contradict their own inner truth. They may find themselves advocating for ideas they don't believe in, maintaining relationships that suffocate them, or tolerating situations that make them miserable, just to maintain an image of acceptance. This type has learned to ask, what do they expect from me, rather than, what do I want? And this inversion of priorities inevitably leads to collapse. Because no matter how hard they try, it's impossible to please everyone. Each failure, each rejection, each criticism feels like a direct attack on their very existence. The most dangerous part? Often they don't even realize they're betraying themselves. They live in automatic mode, addicted to the feeling of being needed, loved, and accepted. They confuse being loved with being useful. And when they're not playing the role of the pleasant, helpful, and understanding one, they feel as though they have no value. Like their presence doesn't matter unless they're serving someone else. But here's the thing. This dynamic is not exclusive to this type. It shows up in varying degrees in many of us. Anytime you say yes just to avoid displeasing someone, or when you withhold your opinion out of fear of rejection, or downplay your pain to avoid bothering others, you're playing into the same psychic logic. You're telling yourself that being accepted is worth more than being authentic. But here's the catch. This game has a price, and your unconscious will start to send you signals, but it doesn't do it with clear phrases or words. It doesn't give you rational arguments or direct warnings. No, it speaks to you through symbols, dreams, and strange compulsions, things that seem to make no sense. The unconscious begins to silently show you everything you're refusing to see. And in the next part, we'll explore these invisible but absolutely crucial signs. We'll uncover how the unconscious tries to rescue your truth when you insist on ignoring it. We'll dive into the language of dreams, symbols, and the deeper messages of the soul that you need to start listening to. Get ready to dive deeper. The unconscious does not speak in the language of logic. It doesn't express itself with clear sentences or direct warnings. Instead, it whispers. And sometimes it shouts through images, impulses, symbols, and sensations that feel strange, repetitive, and even unsettling. When you start living out of alignment with your inner truth, the unconscious doesn't remain silent. It tries to restore psychic balance by sending you these signals. But here's the problem. Most people have never been taught to listen to them. These signals can come in the form of intense, weird dreams. You might dream that you're naked in public or that you're being chased. You could dream that you're trying to speak but no one listens, or that you're trapped somewhere with no way out. These aren't just random, meaningless dreams. They are coded messages, hidden in the symbols of the unconscious, trying to get your attention. Symbolic representations of a collapsing psychic state. The unconscious speaks in symbols. When it can no longer get through with subtle messages, it turns to more dramatic forms of expression. Nakedness in a dream may symbolize the forced exposure of your essence, the raw, vulnerable parts of yourself that you've kept hidden for too long. The chase represents the internal pressure of the persona, always running, always trying to keep up appearances, but never able to escape the truth within. Silence points to the impotence of your will, that feeling of being trapped in a world where your voice no longer matters. Imprisonment is the soul's entrapment in a life that no longer fits, a life built to please others but not aligned with who you truly are. And these aren't the only signs. Sometimes the signals come through the body. Pains with no medical cause, chronic exhaustion, panic attacks, shortness of breath, insomnia. The body, like the psyche, doesn't lie. When the symbolic language of the unconscious isn't heard, it resorts to physical language. This is the last resort to wake you up, to pull you out of autopilot and force you to confront what you've neglected for far too long. Compulsive behaviors. Sometimes when the pain of silence gets too loud, you respond by distracting yourself. You say everything's fine, but then you eat too much. You buy too much. You lose yourself in social media in endless tasks. anything to avoid being alone with the silence. Because in that silence, your soul begins to speak, and it has things to say. But facing those truths is hard. It hurts to realize you've built a life that has nothing to do with who you really are. It hurts to admit that so many of your choices were made not from desire but from fear. Fear of not being loved, fear of disappointing others, fear of being rejected. But here's the thing. Ignoring these signals doesn't make them go away. In fact, the more you resist, the more they intensify. The psyche won't tolerate lies for long. It demands wholeness. If you refuse to connect with your truth, it will do whatever it takes to make you face it, even if that means breaking everything you've built around you. Jung's compensatory role of the unconscious. Jung said that the unconscious has a compensatory role. It tries to restore balance when the ego veers too far in one direction. So, if you spend all your time pleasing others, denying your desires, and avoiding conflict, the unconscious will push you in the opposite direction, often through aggressive dreams or intense emotional crises that force you to confront your shadow. And yes, while this may sound terrifying, there is something deeply healing in this process. It's from this symbolic collapse that you can begin the process of reconstruction. But this time, it's not about building from the outside in, it's about building from the inside out. The process of individuation, for this healing to happen, it takes more than just intellectual understanding. It requires a deep psychic transformation, a journey Jung called individuation. In the next part, we'll dive into what this process really means, why it's painful yet liberating, and how it can free you from the prison of the persona without destroying everything you've worked for. Let's walk together towards wholeness. The high cost of pleasing others. At some point, you'll reach a breaking point, a moment when pleasing others just becomes too costly. You'll realize that no matter how hard you try to keep up the perfect image, something inside you is crumbling. The fatigue is no longer just physical, it's existential. The emptiness is no longer occasional discomfort, it's a constant void. The feeling of living a life that isn't truly yours becomes unbearable. And it's exactly at this moment that the process of individuation can begin. Individuation, according to Jung, is not just a spiritual luxury. It's a psychic necessity. It's the soul's natural movement toward wholeness. It's the integration of all parts of yourself, especially those parts you've repressed, denied, or forgotten, all to function more smoothly in society. Individuation isn't about abandoning the persona. It's about breaking the total identification with it. It's about remembering that you're more than just the role you've been playing. It's about reconnecting with the deeper, truer self behind the mask. Facing the shadow. But let's be clear, individuation is not easy. It's a process that requires confrontation. It's about looking at everything you've swept under the rug of your consciousness. The ignored desires, the swallowed frustrations, the fears disguised as responsibility. It's about facing the shadow. Those parts of you that you don't want to be, but that you are. Your contradictions, your ambiguous impulses, your anger, pride, need for control, emotional emptiness, everything you hide, even from yourself. This is the work of individuation, and while it's painful, it's the only way to rediscover your authenticity and live a life that is truly yours. Individuation, a path to wholeness. Individuation demands courage, the courage to break free from others' expectations. It's the courage to disappoint those who have always wanted you to be someone you're not. It means giving up superficial praise and seeking a deeper sense of inner coherence. At first, this path may feel lonely, but it's liberating. This journey isn't about perfection, it's about wholeness. You begin to understand that you are made of opposites, light and shadow, strength and fragility. By accepting both, you stop living for others' approval and start living from within yourself. The price of true freedom. But here's the hardest part. You may lose people. You may lose status, comfort, control. But what you gain is infinitely more valuable. Your soul, your voice, your will, and a connection to something that doesn't depend on anyone's validation. Individuation is the radical movement of returning to your inner truth. It's the moment when, despite the pain and beauty of it all, You choose to live from your center, not from the reflection of others. Yes, this process is inconvenient. It's transformative, but it's also the only real path to freedom. Because as long as you live just as a persona, you will always be a slave to an image. And images have no life of their own. They are projections, not true existence. What happens after the mask falls? So what happens after the mask falls? What happens when you start living from who you truly are, without the character, the persona, the armor? What happens in that space between the pain of disidentification and the peace of rediscovery? In the final part of this video, we'll talk about the truth that can be both scary and liberating. Let's take this journey together, toward the end, which is also the beginning of something much bigger. The moment of realization. At this point, you might be feeling something strange, a mix of relief and discomfort. On some level, everything here is starting to make sense. But it's also uncomfortable. The truth is unavoidable now, and it's this discomfort that tells you something has already shifted inside you. If you've made it this far, you are no longer the same person you were when you began this journey. Because now you know. You are not here to be what others expect. The truth is this: you are not here to be what others expect of you. You didn't come into this world to play a role, to please invisible audiences, and to collect approval while silencing your soul. You are here to live authentically, to be whole. You're here to walk firmly in your own truth, even if it costs you praise, friendships, comfort, and stability. Because what you lose on this path was never truly yours, and what you gain is everything. Peace and freedom from within. The persona can protect you. It can give you a place in the world, but it will never give you peace. Because peace doesn't come from the outside. It's born from within, when your thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions align. This deep coherence is only possible when you stop betraying yourself. Freedom doesn't come from external validation. It comes when you finally approve of yourself. When you can look in the mirror without a mask and say, "I am here by my side no matter what happens." This decision to stand by yourself is a silent revolution that will change everything. But here's the truth. This revolution doesn't happen all at once. It begins in stages, in small decisions, in moments like this one. A commitment to yourself. So if this video has touched you, if at any moment you felt it spoke directly to your soul, I want you to comment below. Share what you're feeling right now. Let us know what moved you the most. Give voice to what's stirring inside you. This space is for you. By writing, you not only share but also commit to yourself. And remember, this is just the beginning. There's another video waiting for you, perhaps even more important than this one. The path to self-knowledge cannot be interrupted. It can only be deepened. So keep going. Go back inside and get ready to go even deeper. Because the truth does indeed set you free, but only when you have the courage to face it. To the very end. I'll see you there.